Well, welcome back to Christmas with Chloe. It's really great to have your company here on Christmas Day. Happy Christmas to you, if I've not said it already. But we're joined now in the studio by Bethan Lycett, who is a Christian author. She's written various kids' books, including one called The Nativity. It's a rhyming story all about the Nativity, hence the name. Bethan, happy Christmas to you.
Oh, thanks, Chloe. Happy Christmas to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. You're going to help us unpack the Christmas story a little bit, because we were saying this earlier on when you joined me, first off, that sometimes we can take bits out of the Christmas story and sometimes we can put bits in that aren't actually there. So we're going to have a little look at some of the different characters. And I very nearly missed this person out, and you told me off, basically.
I'm sorry.
I was going, right, we'll talk about this person, we'll talk about this one. No, it's good, I need to be corrected. And then you said to me, well, John the Baptist, he's a really big part of the story. And he is, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in fact, he is probably the most underrated part of the Christmas story. Bit of a boring fact for some people, but I am a mathematician at heart. I used to be a maths teacher. 40% of the Nativity story that's told in Matthew's 2 chapters and Luke's 2 chapters is just about John the Baptist. Wow. And his family, his mum, his dad. So 40%, and he is often left out. So I feel a little bit bad for John the Baptist.
I feel awful now that I completely forgot about him. But yeah, like you said, he was the one pointing the way, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And if Luke felt that it was such a significant part to include, then I think it's important that we consider what's going on with John's story as well.
Luke was a doctor, wasn't he? So he was all about the detail as well.
Yeah, absolutely. His gospel is very detail centered, and long chapters. But if you want to know something, go to Luke and he'll fill you in on all the details.
Yeah, it's a really good book. They're all great gospels. But yeah, Luke is a particular favourite of mine. But John the Baptist, his mum was Elizabeth. And I guess that's kind of when we first come into contact with Mary, isn't it? Because Elizabeth goes to visit Mary.
Mary goes to visit Elizabeth.
That's it.
And
there we go.
At that point, Elizabeth is already pregnant. But if we take a few steps back, Elizabeth is older. She's an older lady. She has never been able to have children. And so for her to be pregnant in the first place is a miracle. And we're told in Luke's gospel about his John the Baptist's dad, Zechariah, who was a priest. And he was visited by an angel when he was on duty in the temple. And so it's a really important part of the story, because for Elizabeth to be pregnant as well as Mary is a miracle as well.
Yeah, because then John the Baptist's dad, Zechariah, he wasn't able to speak when he saw the angel, was it? He didn't believe that this was going to happen?
He questions the angel about what's going to happen, and as a result of that, he is then not able to speak about it. So for an extended period of time, pretty much the whole pregnancy, he is not able to speak.
I can't imagine what that would be like. You know me, I can talk for England. So.
Me too.
Oh, can you imagine? It'd be horrid. So then he was told, you have to call your son John. And I remember reading this the other day, all the relatives, when John the Baptist was born, they were saying, well, you need to call him after his dad. And there needed to be some kind of family connection in those days, didn't there? But then because the angel had said to Zechariah, no, he needs to be called John, Elizabeth was like, hang on a minute, we're calling him John. And that was that.
Yeah, and Zechariah wrote down on the ground, call him John. And at that point, he was then able to speak again, and everyone was amazed.
Yeah, so then Mary comes to visit Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, Mary visits Elizabeth in the middle bit.
When she's pregnant,
in the middle bit, yeah.
We'll get there eventually. And that's when the baby, he leaps for joy, doesn't he?
Yeah, so John the Baptist, when he's in Elizabeth's womb, almost acknowledges when Mary arrives that she's carrying the Saviour. So, Elizabeth passes that information on to Mary, and
it's incredible.
It's amazing.
Such an amazing moment, and that detail of that being recorded as well, because they could have just left it out and just been like, it was nothing, but that was actually a really significant point.
Yeah. And then Mary sings this song, which again is not very well portrayed in nativities. But last year, our kids' church, I was in charge of sorting it out. So I was like, right, we're going to have the right nativity. It's going to have everything in it. And there is a great CD called Seeds Family. Have you come across Seeds Family Worship?
I think I've heard of them, yeah.
So they do a Christmas CD, and it's a selection of scripture from the nativity story, and one of them is Mary's song. And so we had a little girl, and she sang Mary's song.
Oh,
and it was
my
lovely.
goodness.
It was lovely.
That was adorable. Did people cry?
Yeah, I was going to say not a dry eye.
Beautiful. No, that song is a really important part of the Bible. It's read out so many times, but just the way she's worshipping God in those words, it's fantastic. So let's just move on to Mary for a moment. Now, at this time, she wasn't very old, was she?
No, I mean, it's thought that she'd be a teenager, maybe between 13, 16, somewhere in that region, because that would have been the time when they would have been looking to get married. It seems quite odd to us because culturally that's not something that we would do, but that was the norm for them. So,
So she would have been, I guess, quite a mature teenager. The teenagers must have been. Well, you'd like to think that they were mature.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you?
Goodness me, can you imagine? If that was me, I would have not coped. I think I would have just been freaking out. But to add even more, almost like drama to this, an angel came to see her.
Yep. So she is already kind of engaged to Joseph, but the angel visits her and tells her that she is going to be pregnant and it's going to be, the saviour of the world. So it's quite a revelation, really, that she gets.
Just a little bit.
And her attitude, I'm not sure what my attitude would have been, apart from freaking out a little bit, is let it be as you've said. So she trusts and she'll deal with all the consequences as they come.
Welcome back again to Christmas. I was going to say Chloe with Christmas. Chloe with Christmas, that could work. We'll go with Christmas with Chloe because that's what the show's called. Happy Christmas to you. I hope you're having a really wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have your company. Bethan's back. That works rather nicely. Bethan Lycett is a Christian author. As we said earlier, she's written various different kids' books, including one called The Nativity. And she's just helping us to explore the Christmas story in a bit more depth because sometimes we can add things into the Christmas story. We can forget bits. I mean, she keeps telling me off because I forget characters or I get something wrong. So she's setting me straight and hopefully she's setting you straight as well. So we've already looked at John the Baptist, Elizabeth and Mary. So Bethan, we're going to move on to Joseph. Now, he was described as a righteous man. So when he found out that Mary was pregnant, he was wanting to hide her away, wasn't he?
Well, I mean, it's possible that he wanted to break off the engagement.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Somebody that you're engaged to suddenly is pregnant.
Oh,
there's
and
a lot of stigma attached, and
I'd not thought about it like that. It would have been quite a scandal, I guess.
Absolutely,
wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because then he could have jumped to all sorts of conclusions. She could have been with another man, and
well, the concept of a virgin birth was a little bit far fetched.
Yeah,
and
of course.
Some people even now don't believe that it was a virgin birth, but we are told in the Bible that it was, conceived by the Spirit. And so he's upset, concerned, and is wanting to call off the marriage. But then he's visited by an angel in a dream. And they basically say, you do take Mary as your wife, and this is why. And so they kind of straighten him out, and the angel did a good job because he did.
Yeah.
He married her and accepted that the child that she was carrying would be his. He would take on the responsibility.
Yeah. I can't imagine the amount of trust he would have had to put in that point, because we said how Mary, she was a little bit like, well, what's going on? But she just said, let it be. This is what's going to happen. But then on Joseph's part as well, it was still a really big amount of commitment and trust.
Absolutely. And especially, like you say, the stigma, because people knew the timescales of, how long it would be between getting pregnant and having a baby, and they would have known when they got married. So there would have been those who would have maybe raised their eyebrows at what was going on.
But as we said, Joseph, he accepted it. He trusted God, and he went on to marry Mary. But then Mary and Joseph, once they'd come to terms with what was happening, they then had to travel to Bethlehem, didn't they?
Yeah.
Why was that?
So a census was called. Now we still have census these days.
Just remind me what it is, because I hear all these words and then I forget the meaning.
Yeah, it's just a way of counting, keeping track of people, and we have them in this country, but you just get sent a form in the post. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to travel back to where you were born. But in that time, that was the only way of getting a true count. So Joseph would have to have gone back to the town of his birth, his family town, which was Bethlehem. So even though Mary was pregnant, there was no exceptions. There was no, it's all right, you stay at home and I'll go. So they travelled, it was roughly between 70 to 80 miles. she's pregnant, and they head on to Bethlehem to be counted.
She would have been heavily pregnant, wouldn't she?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how long it took for their journey, but it would have took, between a few days and a week or so, because she's pregnant. And one of the we do in our Christmas nativities have donkeys.
Yeah.
And we sing the song Little Donkey, or some children do.
Yeah.
There is no donkey mentioned, but it is a reasonable assumption that they may have taken a donkey to carry their thing, or even carry Mary, because it was a long way. But it's not specifically mentioned in the story.
Okay, interesting. I was going to ask, that was a bit of a myth that I wanted to unpack, because you do see all the pictures, and there's Mary and Joseph with the head things, and kids always wear the tea towels on their heads, don't they?
Yeah.
To represent Mary and Joseph.
And always a blue dress.
Yeah, why is Mary always? She's always blue.
I don't know. I'm sure there's some symbolic reason, but again, it's not mentioned. It's not mentioned.
And Joseph tends to be just in a brown, or I've sometimes seen him in red. They go with red and blue, which is an interesting one. Always the tea towel though. The tea towel, and maybe some tinsel around for the little band, because that's just a traditional picture, isn't it? They have a covering and then a headband to kind of keep it in place.
Yeah, I think that's just people being quite
Imaginative.
savvy with the what's lying around your house when you're coming up with an outfit. What can we wear for a headdress? Oh, tea towel's about the right size.
So some nativities, they have talking donkeys as well, which is an even
going back for a bit
different...
of Old Testament Balaam.
Oh, but that we can confirm that it was not written that there was a talking donkey or any donkey.
Or not donkey.
But as we said, it's a reasonable assumption to make. They could have had a donkey. I like to think that Mary had some kind of assistance in getting there, because she would have been, sometimes when you get really, really pregnant. I mean, I'm not pregnant, so I don't know. But you see women walking around, and they're kind of having to shift from side to side, and I was going to use the word waddle, and I hate the word waddle, but that's...
Oh, no, but they do. I've had 3 children.
So you've waddled.
Yeah. And I couldn't have walked 70 metres towards the end of my later pregnancies. So never mind 70 miles.
Is that how far it was?
Between 70 and 80 miles, yeah.
Goodness me, I don't even want to... That's bad enough driving in a car. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so Mary and Joseph, they've arrived at Bethlehem. They've been counted... But it's not like it is today, where you can book a hotel in advance, go to an Airbnb and stay somewhere. They had to go around all these different places trying to find somewhere to sleep.
Yeah. And one of the myths that I do want to kind of unpack is the whole innkeeper.
Go on.
Again, your school nativity, or even your church nativity, we've got an innkeeper who waves, shakes his head, points in the other direction and says, no room here. Now, the words, there was no room in the inn, are in the Bible.
Okay.
So that is true.
Tick.
But there's no mention of an innkeeper. There's certainly no mention of anyone turning them away.
Okay.
So bearing in mind culturally, this is Joseph's hometown. This is where his family is from. Bethlehem wasn't a huge place. It wasn't a city like Jerusalem. It was a smaller town. And he would have had relatives there to visit, to go and say, hi, I'm Joseph, your nephew or cousin. And there would have been people who they would have been able to go to and say, can we stay? And bearing in mind, Mary is heavily pregnant. It's not the kind of situation where you'd be like, sorry, can't fit you in. So the idea of them being turned away is not in the Bible, because you can imagine that people would want them to be comfortable, and that Mary would be looked after. So the question is, when it says there was no room in the inn, what does that actually mean? And we combine this with the idea that Jesus is laid in a manger, and this is where the concept of the stable comes from.
Is the stable true? Is it written in the Bible?
It is not written in the Bible. So we take our Western modern worldview of, right, there's no room in the inn, which in our minds becomes a hotel.
Yep.
And we think, right, there's no room in the inn, and Jesus is laid in a manger, which is where the animals feed. So that must mean it is a stable, or some people have suggested a cave, or some outbuilding of some type. But actually, culturally, and even now today, that is not necessarily what that would lead you to believe. So it's more likely, some scholars have said, that the inn that's referred to is a guest room.
Okay.
So there was no room in the guest room because other relatives might already be staying there.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of them not being able to stay anywhere, there would have been an alternative place in the home, which was a downstairs room where sometimes the animals were brought in. So there would have been a manger, so a trough, which would have been available for them to put Jesus in.
Mm-hmm.
So that doesn't mean that there were any animals there at the time.
Point. Yeah.
So,
okay.
There weren't necessarily animals there. It doesn't say in the Bible that there were animals there with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they, they're Jewish. They've got strict rules about cleanliness and, purity. So they probably wouldn't have wanted them around necessarily all the farm animals. But he does get laid in a manger.
Okay.
So no mention of a stable or animals. But he does get laid in a manger.
Which is where animals would feed.
Which is where they would have fed.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. That's a good point, because I've seen nativities before, people have played the part of like the back end of a donkey.
Yep.
There's sheep. Even some films portray it with lobsters and octopus and that kind
I
of
know
thing.
the film you're talking about.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And you look at it and you're going, hang on a minute, there was definitely no lobster in the nativity. I can confirm that, but it does make you wonder, were there cows and sheep and camels and that kind of thing around? But that's an interesting point, because you mentioned about them being Jewish. They wouldn't have wanted the animals to be around, I guess, especially with a pregnant woman as well, because if you turned up at someone's house and they said, oh no, I'm really sorry, but you can go in like the barn, for example, they wouldn't make you sleep with the pigs, would they? They'd probably move the pigs outside. Well, if they're relatives, which most likely they would have been in Bethlehem, then interesting. But you often see those Christmas cards, don't you, where you maybe don't see the baby or you don't see Mary and Joseph's face, but you see these figures, and sometimes there's like a roaring fire in the background.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Have you not seen that? Or there'll be like lights glowing around, and there'll be twinkling stars and like candles and all these animals like looking on at the baby.
Yeah.
But that would not have been the case.
Unlikely.
Can you imagine the sheep just gently looking on at this newborn baby?
I think we sometimes need extra parts for nativities. Like, we've run out of the main roles, and so you're like, oh, what are you going to be? Right, we're going to have a pig, and well, definitely not a pig, actually. A cow, a sheep. You kind of just incorporate as many different elements as you can to fulfill different roles. But that's where sometimes we lose the truth of what the actual biblical account is.
Yeah, because it must have been pretty cold.
I don't know. Well, it wasn't the winter.
No, but I guess at night time the temperatures do drop, don't they, in general?
Oh, yeah.
But it's not like they're going to be snug up in bed in a king-size bed with fluffy pillows, and
no.
It wouldn't have been like that at all.
No, but again, I think we're viewing it with our modern Western worldview. I think they would have been comfortable by their own standards.
Well, welcome along once again to Christmas with Chloe. I'm having a great time here in this studio. Your company is absolutely fantastic. Loving singing along to all these carols and all these songs. I feel proper Christmassy. And Bethan Lycett is still here, aren't you? You're still there. She's still in the corner, just sticking with us. And we're basically busting some of the nativity myths. That's what we're saying. Because often we can look at the nativity, we can look at the Christmas cards in the films, and there are lobsters involved or different things in the Christmas story that have been taken out and bits that have been put in, and it gets a little bit confusing. So we're just trying to bust some of these myths. But one of the big ones is that we celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December, and people say that's Jesus's birthday, but it's not, is it?
It's highly unlikely that the 25th of December was Jesus' birthday.
Shocking.
I know. Well, I'd rather people say it was Jesus' birthday than Santa's birthday, to be honest.
Okay, yeah,
to be honest.
That's a fair point. But it wouldn't have actually been today.
No. But we can say we celebrate Jesus' birth on Christmas Day. And that's why I say to my children, we celebrate Jesus being born on Christmas Day. But I don't say it's his birthday.
So when would he have been born?
Again, we don't get told specifically, but the clues that we have. So going back to the story of Zechariah being visited in the temple by the angel and being made mute so he can't speak anymore. Based on the priestly tribe that he was in and his section of that group, we can work back, do a little bit of detective work on when he was in the temple serving. And we can work out when John the Baptist was probably born. And then again, tie that into when Mary comes to visit Elizabeth, etc., etc. And that leads us to being somewhere around the start of September.
Ah.
Yeah. Now, the shepherds also, which we've not come on to yet, but they wouldn't have been out in the fields in the middle of December. So, we can rule that out anyway. But there's also some thoughts that there's a Feast of Trumpets, which is a Jewish feast, which is the 2nd of September.
Okay.
Which some people think, well, obviously, the angels announce his birth. It would be like a Feast of Trumpets. So that it could have been around there. But then again, we don't know. So it's just roughly, somewhere around September time.
Interesting. And yet we celebrate it in December.
Yeah, so we sometimes get a bit upset that people try and hijack Christmas and Easter to some extent as well, that, non-Christians or other faiths are celebrating, and we think we're very protective over it and think, well, we're celebrating Jesus' birth. But actually, we kind of hijacked Christmas from the pagans.
Did we?
We did. Yeah. So the 21st of December is the midwinter's day. So
Yes.
it is the shortest daylight hours in the year. So, you'll notice that obviously the nights seem much longer and the daylight's shorter. And that is actually the shortest daylight hours. But it would take a few days for you to notice that the sun was coming back for a longer amount of time. So it would take, roughly 3 to 4 days for you to be aware, oh, the sun is coming back again. And so they would celebrate this festival to rejoice that, as they thought, because we're talking about pagans here, they thought their God was blessing them and letting the sun return.
Right, okay.
So they had this celebration to mark the sun returning to them so that they would have a year of harvest and whatever. So what we've tended to do as Christians is when there have been festivals, pagan festivals, that people would have already been celebrating, we don't want Christians to feel left out of them. So we think, right, well, how can we use this as an opportunity to celebrate? And so it was thought, do you know what? The return of the sun, the sun is Jesus, let's celebrate it there. Now, that's not a full explanation of why we do it on the 25th of December, but it's part of the reason. We also hijacked Easter, but that's for another day.
We're not talking about that. You can come back at Easter time. Come back next year and we'll do it then. I'm not doing that now. I don't think my little mind can cope with this. Right, you mentioned, though, the shepherds. I want to touch on them. Honestly, I love all of the Nativity. We all do. But one of my favourite bits is the shepherds and seeing the angels appear to them. But it's important to remember that the shepherds, they weren't just like farmers who had, comfortable houses. They were the lowest of the low, weren't they?
Yeah, they were definitely a kind of lower end society worker. They were out in the fields. They would have slept overnight with the sheep to kind of look after them because there would have been predators, and so they were out there. It wasn't a luxury job. It was hard work. You had to be really hardy. A way of comparing them is like a docker or somebody who works like a fisherman, I suppose, and that's
practical.
A really practical, hard-working, really sturdy and hardy person who, might be a little bit rough around the edges.
Okay.
But
because sometimes
it's really important that they were the ones who were first told of Jesus' birth.
Yeah, because they were, as we said, the lowest of the low. But sometimes when I think of shepherds and like the Christmas cards, again, you can see them as quite young boys maybe. So then when it says that the shepherds, they were scared, maybe you could kind of understand it a little bit. But as you said, they slept with the sheep to protect them from predators. So they would have been fighting off bigger animals. So they would have been quite brave, actually, and strong. So then when the angel appeared in the sky, they were then terrified. So
Absolutely.
you might not necessarily expect them to be as terrified, but they were petrified.
Yeah. And so, like you say, we're not talking about somebody who would be scared of a wolf or a bear. They fought, like we read about with David fighting off wild animals. They would have been prepared to protect the sheep. They would have their staff ready to do that.
Whack them like that.
But at the sight of this first angel, they are afraid. And they have to be told, do not be afraid. So this is another little myth, is that the angels were cute and,
Tinsel,
sweet.
glittery.
Yeah, and little girls. No. A mighty angel, almost certainly male, who is a frightening sight to the shepherds, and in the glory of God appears to them, they are frightened. And these are men who are not easily scared.
What a sight that must have been.
Yeah.
Like, just to be like a fly on the wall, as it were, and just watching these fully grown men, really strong and brave, just to be like cowering and trembling in the sight of that angel. But then, one angel appeared at the start.
Yeah.
And then a whole host of them appeared as well.
Yeah.
That must have been insane to look at.
I wish I could have seen it.
I know, me
I wish
too.
I could have seen it.
Must
And I
have been
wish I could have
absolutely
heard them singing, because that must have been amazing. Because they sing praises to God. And yeah.
I like to think they had harps. Because I do play the harp, so I'm.
Do you?
Yes,
Wow.
I do. Have you not been listening to my show in the lead up to Christmas? My Harp the Herald game. It's very popular. Very popular. I play the harp live on air, although my strings keep breaking, so that's a bit of a nightmare. But one of the guys at my church who I grew up with, he was really lovely. He always used to wind me up, but he used to say, "Oh, you play the harp because you're practicing for heaven." But I do like to think that the angels, they had their harps there, and it was really tuneful, and I bet they sang beautifully, not like me in church when I'm like screeching all the high notes or whatever. I bet they have beautiful voices.
Well, it doesn't mention a harp, but we can.
I will think. I will think
about
that.
it.
Although we're trying not to add bits to the story that aren't in there. Stop it, Chloe. Okay, so we've got the shepherds. I just want to bring it back to the fact that they were the lowest of the low. That's quite significant, isn't it? Because the angels could have appeared to anybody. They could have appeared to the king. They could have appeared to, a priest, but they appeared to the shepherds.
Yeah, it's a really important aspect of Jesus' birth, that they were the ones who first were told, and not just, oh, this has happened, wow, go and see him. Like, they were told, go down to Bethlehem and you'll see this. And they were they were his first visitors, really.
Did you reckon they had their sheep following them?
See, I don't think they would. Again, I'm not sure how practical it would have been, because they would have been frightened and then really excited, and they want to go down. I can't imagine their first thought is to herd all their sheep down to Bethlehem, because they weren't in Bethlehem, they were in a region nearby.
Okay.
So they had to, travel
it's a long
little
way for
bit.
the sheep, isn't it?
So I don't know. Maybe they left. I don't know. It doesn't say. I
just
think
got this
ultimately
image.
it doesn't say, but I'm not convinced that they did take the sheep with them.
It's just quite a funny thought. The shepherds charging down, all these little sheep trotting down after them. But actually, that's quite a sacrifice. I've just thought of that, because if they would have left their sheep,
If they did leave them, that is, they, I wouldn't have wanted to be the one left behind. If you just seen all those angels, you're like, right, Luke over there, you just stay here with the sheep, because we all want to go and see Jesus.
they all would have gone, wouldn't they?
Yeah, they would have gone.
That's incredible. Yeah, and the sheep could have then been attacked. We don't know what happened to those poor sheep. But yeah, that is a big sacrifice, because that would have been almost like their.
Yeah.
Their
But
whole
again, we don't know.
We don't
It
know.
doesn't say, but we do know that the shepherds did go as they were told to, and they did visit Jesus.
They were very obedient.
Yeah,
And excited.
I imagine they were very excited.
Well, here on UCB2, it's Christmas with Chloe. I'm so excited. I love Christmas Day, and it's really great to have your company. We're currently unpacking little bits of the Christmas story, looking at the different characters and busting the Christmas nativity myths that sometimes we think happened, and actually they didn't. They weren't in the Bible, therefore they didn't happen. And we're joined by Bethan Lycett, who is a Christian author. She's written a really lovely rhyming story about the nativity, and she is basically being our myth buster. And she joins me again now. Hello again to you.
Hi.
You doing okay? You're coping with all of these questions and things that I'm getting wrong? And
Yeah, it's okay. I just, I love helping people to see the true nativity, because I think it is really important that we go back to the Bible and see what it's saying about what happened when Jesus was born.
100%. It's crucial that we get the facts right as well. So we've looked at so many different characters. We've done John the Baptist, Elizabeth, Zechariah, Mary, Joseph. We've looked at the stable that wasn't a stable, the inn that wasn't an inn, that Jesus wasn't actually born in December. He would have been born roughly September time. It's all crazy stuff. We've also looked at the shepherds and the angels. Oh, it's a lot. Now we're on to the three kings. Who aren't the three kings? What's that about?
No, I think this must be probably one of the most frustrating things about the nativity for me. But no, there are not three kings. They weren't kings, and there probably weren't three of them. So when the next time you hear "we three kings," you're just going to be shaking your head with me, going, "No,
Shouldn't be a thing.
No,
Shouldn't be a
thing." We are told that there were wise men in the east who saw a star and travelled to see the one who'd been born to be king. So that's what we're told. And we also told that they bring 3 types of gift: gold, frankincense, myrrh. So we are told those things. That is true.
Good.
But we're not told that they're kings. I'm not sure when the king idea crept in, but some people might think, well, they bring these very expensive gifts, so they must have been kings. Well, unlikely, because if they were kings, it would have said specifically kings of where and who they were. So we're not told that. And we are just told that there's 3 types of gifts, not that there were 3 people bringing them.
Right.
So it's much, much more likely that there would have been a whole group of these wise people who would have travelled in what's referred to as a caravan. So not the caravan you might have on your drive that you go on your summer holidays in, but a travelling kind of group of people who would have set off when they've seen this star and figured out what it meant, that they've decided, they've packed up their stuff. It would have taken a reasonable time to plan the trip and a very long time to travel. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of miles. 3 of them is probably not going to have cut it. It's just not likely. More likely is there is the thought that there might have been 12. So that was a kind of standard caravan size. Or even some people think there were many, many people, like a whole group. Have you seen the film Aladdin?
Yes.
So one of the things I've started to think of recently is when Aladdin comes into the town of Agrabah, where he's going to try and win Jasmine
Prince
over.
Prince
Ali.
Yeah.
And they're all singing and dancing. I kind of think, well, maybe it was like that. Now, again, it doesn't say that in the Bible, but what we are told is that when they arrive, they go to see Herod and he welcomes them in. Now, if you've just got 3 random people who just appear at your door, you probably might not take much notice of them. And we're even told that all Jerusalem is concerned about what's going on. So they made a big impact. And again, 3 people who travel in. Jerusalem's a very busy city with lots of people coming and going. So 3 people arriving, probably not going to make a big impact. So it's more likely that there was a big group of them who make a big impact, who are then welcomed in to see Herod, and the news that they bring him troubles Herod.
Yeah, it does. And I was going to touch on Herod, actually, because he is almost the bad guy in this story, isn't he?
He is, yeah. There's no getting away from it. He is the bad guy. We don't have any good things said about Herod. So they make the assumption that they've seen this star, they're expecting a king, so they go to the palace. That's where you might expect to see a newborn king. And Herod clearly knows nothing about it, so he goes to his advisors and questions them, and then he questions the wise men about what information they have. And then he sends them away with the instruction to go and search for the child, and then when they find it, to come back, because he'd like to go and worship the child. But we know that that's not true. He just wants them to find the child and report back to him so that he can do something about it. And sadly, we are then told, and again, this is one of the bits that is often omitted from your school or church nativity, because it's quite terrible. When the wise men don't return to Herod, because they're warned in a dream not to go back and to divert past Jerusalem and go a different way so he doesn't know, he orders that all the children, all the boys under 2 are killed in Bethlehem and the surrounding region. And it is a big issue. The death of the innocents, it's often referred to as. And so, no, Herod was definitely the baddie in this story. There's not a lot nice we can say about him at all.
No, I mean, sometimes I do read it and I think I really wish there was something good we could say about him, but he was pure evil, really. It's just horrid, ordering all those boys to be killed. If that would happen today, I like to think that it wouldn't, but if you heard about it, it'd be all over the news. It'd be absolutely horrific, but he was just able to do it like that. It's just horrid.
Yeah.
Really horrid.
Yeah, it's It is, and it's not nice, and we do try and sanitize in some way the nativity because we don't want to refer to that, but that is the reality that Jesus was opposed even from his birth.
Yep.
That the devil, and working through Herod in this situation, was trying to kill Jesus from his birth, and so we've got to be aware of it. I know it's probably not what you want to see at your school nativity. But to take it out completely, almost, we like to end our nativity on a high, like, oh, the wise men visited. Isn't it lovely? They brought gifts. But actually, that's not where the story ends. So we do it a disservice if we leave out that important factor.
Yeah, well, Herod was a bad guy. We have confirmed that. We've looked at the wise men who were not the three kings. There would have been many more. Next, we're going to look at two characters in the Christmas story who sometimes, well, they don't appear in the nativity, or I've not seen them in the school productions, but we'll take a look at these two characters who maybe are a little bit underrated. So here on Christmas with Chloe, we've been unpacking some of the Christmassy myths that appear in the Nativity. We've been saying that sometimes you can add things into the story or take them out. And some people may not necessarily have heard of these two characters because they don't appear in the Nativity. And Bethan Lycett is here just to explain a bit more. These two characters are Anna and Simeon.
Yeah.
Who are these people? Because you don't hear of them in the nativity plays, do you?
Well, no, in a traditional nativity, again, I'm going to give you a bit of a boring statistic, but I do love statistics. In a standard nativity that you would see in a school play or in a church on a the week before Christmas, whatever, I worked out that we represent, well, I'll let you guess, what percentage of the actual biblical nativity do you think is actually portrayed in most of those?
30%.
Oh, you're near 35.
Oh,
well,
so that's slightly better than what I get. Oh, I'm quite impressed with myself. Thank you.
So only 35% of the nativity.
That's horrific.
Yeah. So the other 65% we just kind of ignore. Which is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. So
part of that, what we've already touched on, which is John the Baptist and Zechariah and Elizabeth. So that is a big chunk of that 65%, as we said before. But another part that is very often missed out, but is so important, is Anna and Simeon. So what would have happened after Jesus was born? After 8 days, he would have been needed to be taken to the temple, and that would have been done by Joseph. Mary wasn't allowed in the temple at this point because she's just given birth. So Joseph must have taken Jesus to Jerusalem after 8 days to have him circumcised. We jump forward a little bit to around 40 days when Mary is now classed as being pure. She's allowed to go into the temple now, and we know that she went because in Luke's gospel we're told that she's there. And so they take Jesus for the purification rites, and they have to take him to be dedicated. So they take him, and when they go into the temple in Jerusalem, they are greeted by Simeon. And when he sees Jesus, he knows in his heart that this is the Messiah. So, it's just obvious to him. He even says to Mary, "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rising of many in Israel." So he just instinctively knows, like the Spirit speaks to him and says, "This is the child you've been waiting for." And he just knows. He just sees Jesus and knows. And that's incredible, isn't it? And then Anna, who is a prophetess, she is in the temple. She had been widowed. She's, an older lady, quite old. And again, she sees him and she gives thanks to God because she knows that he is the child who is going to bring forth the promises of the covenant. So it's pretty amazing. And so these two characters, we're not told that they've come across Mary and Joseph before, but as soon as they meet Jesus for the first time, even as that small baby, 40 days old, roughly, they know that he is the Messiah.
That's amazing.
It is.
Really amazing. And was it Anna? She was told that she wouldn't die until she'd seen the birth of Jesus, or was that Simeon?
I think it was Simeon. So
that's incredible. So like you said, he had that instinctive feeling. He just knew that was Jesus. But just to be told that you're not going to die until you've seen the Messiah, that's incredible.
Yeah. I've just checked. It's Luke 2:26,
Mm-hmm.
and it said the Holy Spirit had told him he wouldn't die until he'd seen the Christ.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So these people were obviously very special to, Simeon. He was told he wouldn't die until he'd seen him, so he almost had a bit of a heads up, if you like.
Yeah, but how would you know? Like, humanly speaking, how would you know? He would come across people every day in his role in the temple,
Yeah.
and would you just always be thinking, is that the person, is that the person? But he just knows when he sees him, he takes him in his arms and he blesses God because he just knows this is it. This is the one.
Yeah.
And it's a baby. It's not a mighty warrior. It's a baby.
He wouldn't have been dressed any differently or been brought in with like a parade of trumpets. He would have just been a little baby brought in by his parents.
Yeah.
And he must have had loads of babies being brought into the temple. So that's incredible. It would have been, the Holy Spirit would have, moved him inside to know that was Jesus. But I love that. They are two very underrated characters.
They are, and again, this part of Luke's gospel is not like one line or two verses. It's a significant chunk, and we're told that they took with them as part of the sacrifice 2 doves or pigeons, which it means that they weren't wealthy people. They were, relatively everyday people, poor people, that was what they were taking for their sacrifice. So again, it wasn't like they'd come in with all their money and wealth and were like, and he saw that and thought, wow, this must be the king that's been born. No, he saw it even in amongst their normality and poverty, really.
Oh, the Nativity. It's amazing, isn't it? Really amazing. And just to be able to bust some of those myths as well. I'll tell you what, I've learned an awful lot these past few hours. Thank you so much for busting. Are there any other myths before I let you go that we need to bust, or have we busted most of them? I've said busted too many times.
I think you said it quite a lot. I think, we've covered it. I think the only thing that we've not said, which is how this bit of Anna and Simeon fits in, is that this happened before the wise men.
Okay.
So this would have happened before the wise men, and then the wise men would have come at a later time.
Right.
Any time between that 40-day mark when they go to the temple and 2 years, because that's when Herod says, that's the time scale that he's working off for, unfortunately, his plan. So when the wise men came, Jesus is not a baby. Okay. Or not a tiny baby anyway.
A bit more of a toddler.
He's referred to as a child, but again, what that actually means, we're not sure. Okay. So after that, the Bible tells us that not only do the wise men get warned to not go back to Herod, Joseph is warned that he needs to take his family and flee to Egypt. So that's the point at which they go to Egypt. And then only then later, once Herod has died, do they head back into the land. And even then, they can't go back to Bethlehem, which is what it suggests they might have done. They do end up going back to Nazareth.
Okay.
Because of
and then he grew up to be Jesus of Nazareth, didn't he?
Yeah, which fulfills one of the prophecies. So all the prophecies are fulfilled.
Yeah.
There's so many. It just in this part of the Gospels about him being born in Bethlehem, about him fleeing to Egypt, about him growing up in Nazareth. So they're all fulfilled as part of that's happened.
My mind has been blown. I genuinely don't know what else to say now. When you just see it all linking together and seeing how and that's just like the very start of Jesus' life. We're talking like
Absolutely.
a couple of years here. So much happened. And yet to try and condense that into a nativity is quite hard. But it is important that we make sure we do understand what happened. So, because, the kids' nativities, they're all cute. They're all nice. You can take them with a pinch of salt, but it is important to actually unpack it like we've done today.
I think it's really important. And I would urge people to go and read through the first 2 chapters of Matthew and the first 2 chapters of Luke, because you need to read for yourself what happened, because we can just get sidetracked by the cards, even the carols, the nativity plays, and lose track of what actually happened. And that's why I was really keen to write a children's book that touched on all the true elements, left out all the stuff that's not mentioned and we're not sure about. And because I think we sometimes dumb down or simplify things too much. And we need to make sure that we're giving our children the truth as well.
Well, thank you so much for unpacking the story today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for telling me off. I needed to be told off every now and again. Not many people are brave enough to do that, but you certainly did. So thank you very much. I tell you what, I need a cup of tea and a mince pie after all that.
Absolutely.
Oh, I just need a bit of a break just to go and process it. So wherever you are right now, just go and grab yourself a cuppa, just process it all and get yourself a mince pie as well. Bethan, thank you very much.